Mornings at the Thornbridge house always started the same way. I woke up at 6 a.m., long before the others. My body, accustomed to early rising after decades of teaching, refused to submit to the new routine of a retired teacher. And what kind of retiree am I if I've only gotten more work? My wrinkled hands carefully made the bed. Here, in the room that my son and daughter-in-law had generously allocated to me, I tried to keep at least some order. The room was small, a former guest bedroom with only a bed, a dresser, and a tiny desk. The only picture on the wall was of Harold and me on our 40th wedding anniversary. 3 years ago he'd left, and my life had been divided into a before and an after. I walked quietly out into the hallway, trying not to squeak the floorboards. Paisley didn't like being woken up before her bedtime, especially if I was the culprit. The kitchen greeted me with a familiar silence. I turned on the coffee maker, a gift I'd brought with me from Harold and me. One of the few things I'd been able to pick up when Noel convinced me to sell the house. Mom, why do you need this huge house? You're all alone. You'll be fine here in Burlington with me, Paisley, Marlowe around. Golden old age, as they say. Golden old age. I grinned, cracking the eggs into the pan. I wonder how much gold was left over from the sale of our house. The house where Harold and I had lived for 35 years. The house with the wisteria-covered veranda and the garden where I grew tomatoes and roses that made the whole neighborhood proud. I'll put it all in a trust fund, Mom. You'll get interest, so you'll have more than enough for your pocketbook. And the principal will remain. Pocket money. At the age of 77, I was once again a child who was given pocket money. Except that it was less and less frequent and the amounts were getting smaller and smaller. There are temporary fluctuations in the market, Mom. It's no big deal. You just have to wait it out. I put breakfast on plates, separate for Noel, separate for Paisley. For him, scrambled eggs and bacon, lightly toasted toast, and strong coffee. Her oatmeal with berries and green tea. Everything had to be perfect or the day would start with remarks. At 8:30, her son came down to the kitchen. His hair, once thick and brown, was now thinning and graying at the temples. Wrinkles cut across his forehead, the marks of the constant strain of working as an insurance broker. "Good morning, Mom," he mumbled, immediately turning to the phone. "Good morning, darling. Here's your breakfast." He nodded without looking up. I'm used to it. Before, when Harold and I were separated, Noel had called once a week for the holidays. He'd have words and attention for me then. Now that I was part of his daily routine, it was like I was a piece of furniture, familiar but unattended. Paisley came down at 8 o'clock, impeccably dressed and wearing makeup as always. In her 48th, she was meticulous about her appearance, as if afraid to detect the first signs of fading. Her blonde hair was arranged in a perfect style that would not change until the evening. "Edith," she never called me mother or even Mrs. Thornbridge, "you put too much cinnamon in your oatmeal again." "I'm sorry, Paisley. I'll make it up to you next time." She pursed her lips, pushing her plate away. "Noel, don't forget, the designer's coming today. We need to discuss the renovation of the second floor." My son nodded, keeping his eyes on the phone, and I froze with the coffee pot in my hand. The second floor? It's just Noel and Paisley's bedroom, bathroom, and my room. "Are you planning on remodeling upstairs?" I asked cautiously. Paisley looked at me as if I were an unreasonable child. "Of course, Edith. The house needs updating, especially that little room next to ours. We want to make it a home office. With all the video conferencing, Noel needs his own workspace." But, I live in that room." There was silence. Noel finally got off the phone and looked at his wife. "Mom, we haven't made a decision yet. We're just going to see what the designer has to offer." "Then where will I move to?" Paisley flashed a smile that never touched her eyes. "We'll figure something out, Edith. Maybe in the basement. We could make a cozy little room down there. The cellar. Where it's damp and windowless, and where Paisley refused to go because of the horrible atmosphere." I looked at my son, expecting him to object, but he shrugged guiltily. "We'll have to think about it, Mom." Nothing had been decided yet, but I knew that tone. It had already been decided. It would just be announced to me at the last moment. When they left for work, I was left in an empty house. My companions were only Chester, their lazy golden retriever, and ruthless thoughts. How had I come to this life? I was once a respected chemistry teacher with a home of my own, a loving husband, and independence. Now I was a ghost in someone else's house, a free housekeeper and a dog sitter. I mechanically performed the usual chores: laundry, cleaning, cooking. By lunchtime, I took Chester out for a walk, though my knees were sore from scrubbing the floors yesterday. The dog trotted leisurely beside me as I wandered through the quiet streets of Burlington, so different from the streets of Ridgefield where Harold and I lived. Our house in Ridgefield was modest but spacious. 2 stories with a porch and a garden in the backyard. Harold built me a greenhouse where I could grow plants all year round. In the springtime, the whole place was drenched in flowers. Neighbors often stopped to talk, admiring my roses. There was a real community there, people we'd been friends with for decades. But here, in an upscale Burlington neighborhood, neighbors barely said hello. Everyone was in a hurry. No one was interested in an elderly woman with a dog. I felt invisible. When I got home, I checked the mail. Among the advertising brochures was an envelope from the bank where Harold and I had a joint account. Strange, because Noel had said he'd moved all the money into an investment fund. I opened the envelope and saw the statement. There were only $237.20 left in the account. I remembered that after all the expenses for Harold's funeral, there should have been about $15,000 left in the account, our savings for a rainy day. My hands trembled. What's happening to my money? The money from the sale of the house was one thing, but where had my savings disappeared to? I tucked the statement into my sweater pocket and headed to the kitchen to make dinner. My mind was spinning with numbers and questions, but I realized there was nothing I could do right now. I had to wait for the right moment to talk to Noel. At 5 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang. Marlo, my granddaughter, my favorite and only granddaughter, stood on the doorstep. At 22, she looked so much like me when I was young. The same brown hair, the same stubborn chin, the same spark of curiosity in her eyes. Grandmother! She hugged me, and for a moment the world was a brighter place. Marlo, darling, what a surprise. I didn't know you were coming. She rolled her eyes in her typical gesture. I wrote to Daddy last week. Did he forget to warn you again? I just smiled. Noel often forgot to give me messages from his daughter. Sometimes I felt like he was deliberately trying to limit our communication. Marlo was too direct and often criticized my parents' attitude towards me. It doesn't matter as long as you're here. Come on in, I'm just getting dinner ready. Marlo went into the kitchen and sat at the table, watching me chop vegetables for the salad. How's school going? I asked. Are you still into environmental studies? I love it, Grandma. We're doing an urban gardening project. I was thinking about your garden in Ridgefield. It was a real model of sustainable gardening. I smiled, remembering my lost paradise. Yeah, I miss it. Your parents have such a neat yard, but there's no room for a real garden. Marlo frowned. I still don't understand why you sold the house. I mean, you loved it. I sighed, not knowing what to say. How could I explain that after Harold's death I'd been so overcome with grief that I couldn't resist Noel's persistent entreaties? How do I admit that I believed his promises of care and attention? Sometimes, darling, we make decisions we regret. But what's done is done. Marlo came over and put her arm around my shoulders. Are you okay, Grandma? You seem kind of, faded. I tried to smile, but I felt like the smile didn't reach my eyes. I'm just a little tired. At my age, that's normal. It's not your age, she insisted. There's something wrong here. I feel it every time I come here, this atmosphere, like you're not at home here, smart girl. Always has been, bright beyond her years. I was about to answer, but I heard the front door open. Paisley came home from work. She walked into the kitchen, gave us a cold look, and said, Marlo, I didn't know you were coming today. I was writing to Daddy, her granddaughter replied, straightening up. There was always tension between her and Paisley. He said everything was fine. Of course everything's fine. Paisley smiled, strained. It's just that we're having a designer over today to discuss the remodeling. I hope we don't get in each other's way. I continued cooking dinner, trying not to draw attention to myself. But Marlo wouldn't be herself if she didn't say something. What renovations? She asked. Second floor, Paisley said casually. We want to update the bedroom and make a home office out of the guest room. Grandma's room, you mean? Marlo's voice sounded metallic. And where is she going to move to? Paisley gave me an annoyed look, as if I'd encouraged my granddaughter to ask that question. We're looking at options. Maybe the basement. There's plenty of room. The basement? Marlo raised her voice. Are you serious? It's damp and dark. Marlo, I intervened. Don't. It's okay. We haven't decided anything yet. But the granddaughter was furious. No, Grandma, it's not okay. They sold your house, took the money, and now they want to put you in the basement? That's enough. Paisley cut her off. Edith is a guest here, and we do our best to make her comfortable. But it's our home, and we have the right to decide how we want it furnished. A guest. That's what I was in my sister-in-law's eyes. Not her husband's mother, not her daughter's grandmother. Just a guest who'd been here for 3 years. At that moment, Noel returned, and the kitchen became too crowded. He was surprised to see Marlo, but quickly switched to telling her about the designer's upcoming visit. He'll be here in an hour. Paisley, have you prepared a wish list? They delved into the renovation discussion, completely ignoring the tension between Marlo and Paisley. I set the table in silence, feeling invisible in my own family. Dinner passed in a tense atmosphere. Marlo tried to make small talk about my situation, but Noel deftly deflected the subject, and Paisley answered with a single cold reply. I could see how upset my granddaughter was, and I felt guilty for a situation I'd created by my own weakness. After dinner, Noel took me aside. Mom, I realized talking about your room was unexpected, but we really need a home office. You see how much I work from home. I understand, son, but the basement. It's a temporary solution, he hastened to assure me. We'll figure something out later. Maybe we can find you a good place in a nursing home. There will be medical care, a community of peers, a nursing home. That's it. Not just moving to the basement, but being cut out of the family altogether. What about my money from the sale of the house? I asked quietly. Would it be enough for a good nursing home? Noel visibly tensed. Mom, this is not a good time to talk about finances. The market is unstable, investments take time. I got the bank statement, I interrupted him. There's almost nothing left in my father's account. Where did our savings go, Noel? He turned pale, then red. Yep. I had to borrow some for a down payment on a new car. I wanted to pay it back, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Don't worry, I'll make it up to you. I looked at my son, a grown man I had raised with love and care, and didn't recognize him. When did he turn into a man who cheats on his own mother? Or had he always been like that and I just didn't want to see it? At that moment, the doorbell rang. The designer had arrived. Noel slipped away with relief, leaving me alone with my bitter thoughts. I went upstairs to my room, which would soon no longer be mine. I sat down on my bed and looked around. A few books on a shelf, old photos, and clothes in a small closet were all that was left of my old life. A quiet knock on the door interrupted my musings. It was Marlo. Can I come in, Grandma? Of course, dear. She sat down next to me on the bed and took my hand. I can't believe they're treating you like this. It's not right. I squeezed her hand. Life is rarely fair, Marlo. It's my fault for letting your father convince me to sell the house. I believed I'd be needed here. I need you, she said fervently, and you deserve to be treated better. You're not a maid. You're Grandma Edith, who taught me how to do chemical experiments in the kitchen and how to grow tomatoes from seed. I smiled, remembering how little Marlo used to watch the sprouting seeds in my greenhouse with delight. What simple joys we shared then. There were voices downstairs. Noel and Paisley were discussing renovation plans with the designer. Plans that didn't include room for me in this house. I looked into my granddaughter's eyes and suddenly felt something inside me change. Maybe it's not too late to take back control of my life. Maybe I still had a choice. Marlo left Sunday night, and the house fell back into a tense silence. I knew our conversation hadn't gone unnoticed. Paisley had passed by the ajar door of my room several times, clearly listening. When my granddaughter hugged me goodbye and whispered, "Think about what I said, Grandma," the daughter-in-law was standing close enough to hear. Monday morning didn't bode well for anything out of the ordinary. I made breakfast, fed Chester, walked Noel and Paisley to work. But something was different. Maybe it was the look my sister-in-law gave me before she left, an appraising cold look, like she was pricing old furniture before a rummage sale. Around noon, my phone rang. Paisley was calling, a rare occurrence. Usually she preferred to communicate with me through Noel. Edith, her voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. Noel and I have decided to have a family dinner on Friday. It's nothing fancy, just a get-together. Sounds great, I replied, sensing something wrong. Is Marlo coming too? No, she had some classes at the university. It'll just be the three of us. I thought you could cook something special. I thought you always said you like to cook for your family. Well, there you go. Testing my usefulness. Of course, darling. What would you like? Maybe that traditional roast beef that Noel always brings up? And, a pie would be nice. Noel mentioned that you used to make wonderful pies. I used to, when I had my own kitchen, my own tools, my own space. Here in Paisley's spotless kitchen, where every pot had its place and spices were alphabetized, I felt like an unwelcome guest. I'll do my best, I promised. The rest of the week passed in preparation. I made a shopping list, carefully selected groceries at the supermarket, and planned the sequence of meals. Roast beef was Harold's specialty. He loved it with Yorkshire pudding and roasted vegetables. For dessert, I decided to bake an apple pie based on my mother's recipe. Paisley might consider my cooking skills outdated, but this pie always made Noel beg for more, even when he was a cranky teenager. Friday came all too quickly. I spent all day in the kitchen preparing a dinner that would prove my usefulness in this house. By 5 o'clock in the evening, the table was set, the dishes prepared, and even fresh flowers bought with my own meager savings adorned the center of the table. Paisley arrived home first. She glanced around the kitchen, lingering on the flowers. Wow, she said with feigned surprise. You really went all out, Edith. I wanted the evening to be special, I replied. She went to the oven and opened it to look at the roast beef. I hope the meat isn't over-dried. Noelle liked it to stay juicy on the inside. I knew that better than she did, after all. I'd been cooking him that roast beef long before she'd come into his life. But I just smiled and nodded. I did my best to cook it just the way he liked it. Soon Noel came back. He looked tired, but when he saw the table set, he smiled. Wow, Mom, you decided to reminisce about old times? Paisley suggested we have a family dinner. I thought you might appreciate your favorite dishes. We sat down at the table. I served roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, roasted vegetables. Everything looked perfect, smelled delicious. Noel was eager to eat, but Paisley just picked at his plate with his fork. Something wrong with the food, dear? Noel asked. Paisley put her fork away and sighed. I just forgot to mention that I've gone on a gluten-free diet, and Yorkshire pudding is full of gluten. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. I'm sorry, Paisley. I didn't realize. I can whip up something else real quick. Don't worry, she smiled strained. I'll eat the vegetables. Although they're kind of, old-fashioned. Everyone cooks vegetables al dente now, not boiled until they're soft. I felt the color flood my face. The vegetables were cooked perfectly. Crispy on the outside, soft on the inside. That's the way Harold liked it. That's how Noel always liked them too. I think the vegetables are great, the son interjected, but hesitantly, glancing at his wife. Of course, dear, Paisley smiled sweetly. It's just that it's such a retro style of cooking. Reminds me of the times when people didn't know about proper nutrition yet. The dinner continued in the same spirit. Each dish was accompanied by Paisley's comments about how it was cute but outdated, how modern cooks do things differently, and how the younger generation prefers healthier options. Noel nodded in agreement with his wife, though I could see he was enjoying the food. He cleared his plate down to the last crumb. When I served the apple pie, Paisley rounded her eyes. God, that's a lot of sugar and butter. No wonder the older generation has such heart problems and diabetes. Older generation. To her, I was not a person with a name and a history, but a faceless member of a demographic, as outdated as my prescriptions. Edith, she continued, pushing away the plate of untouched pie. I wanted to talk to you about our plans for the renovation. I tensed inwardly, but tried to keep my expression calm. Yeah, sure. The designer came up with some great designs for your room. It's going to be a great office with built-in bookshelves and ergonomic workstation. Where am I going to live? I asked bluntly. Paisley glanced at Noel and he cleared his throat. Mom, we've been thinking maybe you'd be better off in an assisted living facility. You'd have constant care, a community of peers. You mean a nursing home? I clarified, feeling my insides grow cold. Don't be so dramatic, Paisley intervened. There are beautiful residences for the elderly now. It's not those dreary boarding schools that are shown in old movies. And with what money will I live in this beautiful residence? I asked, looking directly at my son. The money you got from the sale of my house? Noel cleared his throat again. Mom, money's a little tight right now. Smooth. The market's unstable. There's been some losses. What kind of losses, Noel? Paisley stood up abruptly from the table. I think I'll leave you two to discuss financial matters in private. Edith, dinner was, interesting. Thank you for your efforts. With those words, she left the dining room, leaving me and my son alone. Noel looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. Son, I want to know the truth. What happened to the money from the sale of my house? He sighed. Look, Mom, I did put it into an investment fund, just like I promised. But then, some pressing needs came up. Paisley and I had been wanting to renovate the house for a long time, and then we had to replace the car. You used my money for a new house and a new car? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The money from the sale of the house your father and I lived in for 35 years? I was going to give it back. He defended himself. It's just not a good time to be in the market right now. And besides, we've given you a place to live. We feed you. I cook for you, clean the house, take care of the dog. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from restrained anger. I'm not a freeloader, Noel. I'm your mother. He looked ashamed, but only for a moment. Then his face took on a businesslike expression, the same one he'd used to convince me to sell the house. Mom, let's face it. You're 77 years old. You can't live alone. It's not safe. Your pension is too small to rent a place, and a good nursing home is expensive. So you have two choices. Either you stay with us, but you have to realize that there are certain expectations. Paisley thinks you could help out around the house more, be more helpful. More helpful? I interjected. What else am I supposed to do? Well, for one, Paisley would like you to cook more modern dishes. And maybe you could do more housework. Paisley gets very tired at work. Also, it would be nice if you could watch the house when we go away for the weekend. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where was the caring boy that Harold and I had raised? Where had the man who had once promised me a golden old age gone? And the second option? I asked quietly. We'll find you a place in an inexpensive nursing home, no amenities but basic care. Your pension should be enough to support you. I didn't say a word, thinking about what I'd heard. It all came down to a simple choice. Either become a servant in my son's house or live out my life in an institution. And all this after they'd taken the money from the sale of my house. I need to think about it, I said finally. Noel was clearly relaxed, thinking the crisis was over. Sure, Mom, think about it. But not for too long. The designer is waiting for our decision on the office. With these words, he got up from the table, kissed me on the top of my head for the first time in many days, and went out, leaving me alone among dirty plates and uneaten pie. I mechanically began to clear the table. My hands moved on their own, and my son's words rattled around in my head. You're 77 years old. You can't live alone. But is it true? Am I really so helpless that I can't take care of myself? While I was washing dishes, Paisley came back into the dining room. She leaned against the door jamb, watching me. Noel told me about your conversation, she began. I hope you realize that we only want what's best for you. I didn't answer, continuing to wash the plates. Edith, her voice became harder. I know you've been complaining to Marlowe about life here. It's not fair. We took you into our home when you were alone. We care about you. I turned to her, wiping my hands with a kitchen towel. I'm grateful for the roof over my head, Paisley. But I think I've already exhausted your hospitality. Her face flushed slightly. It's not that, it's just, everyone has to contribute to the family. You can't just sit back and expect us to cater to you. I almost laughed. Cater to me? Me, who gets up at 6 in the morning to make their breakfast? Me, who does their laundry, walks their dog, cooks their dinners? I understand. I said instead. I need more help around the house. Paisley seemed surprised by my pliability. Exactly. And maybe revisit some of your outdated habits, like those high-fat, high-carb dinners. They're not good for Noel's health. Of course, I nodded. I can cook more modern, lighter meals. That's fine, she smiled, pleased with her victory. So you're staying with us? The basement could really make a cozy room. I'll think about your proposal, I replied diplomatically. Paisley nodded and walked out, leaving me alone. I finished the dishes, wiped down the countertops, and slowly made my way up to my room. My room for now. Closing the door behind me, I sat on my bed and allowed myself to do something I didn't do in front of them. Cry. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I didn't try to hold them back. I mourned not only my humiliation, but also the loss of my son, the son I thought I knew. When the tears dried up, I went to the window. Beyond it stretched the neat backyard of the Thornbridge house with perfectly cut grass and a few ornamental bushes. No flowers, no vegetable beds. Paisley thought it was rustic. How different from my garden at Ridgefield, where every corner breathed life. I thought of Marlowe's words. You deserve better, Grandma. You don't have to put up with this. And of my response, there's no choice, dear. Where do I go? But what if there is a choice? What if I'm not as helpless as they try to convince me? I pulled an old notebook with a worn leather cover from my dresser. It contained addresses and phone numbers, people Harold and I had kept in touch with over the years. Many of the numbers are probably no longer valid. Some people were probably no longer alive. But there had to be someone left who remembered me not as a burden, but as Edith Thornbridge, a chemistry teacher, a wife, a friend. I flipped through the yellowed pages until I found the name I was looking for. Elizabeth Ramsey is a colleague of mine from Ridgefield High School. We taught together for almost 20 years. After retiring, she moved to Burlington to be closer to her daughter. We occasionally called each other, but since Harold's death, I had lost touch with many friends. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number on my old push-button phone. After a few rings, I thought the number was invalid, but suddenly I heard a familiar voice. Hello? Elizabeth? It's Edith. Edith Thornbridge. Edith, my God, it's been ages. How are you, my dear? Her voice, warm and sincere, was a balm to my wounded soul. We talked for nearly an hour. She talked about her life in Burlington, her grandchildren, the book club she attends. I was more restrained, not wanting to spill the bitterness of my situation at once. Elizabeth, I finally decided, I have a question for you. Do you know if there's a cheap apartment around here? It's nothing special, it's just, do you want to move away from your son? She asked me directly. Elizabeth was always perceptive. Yes, I admitted. Things have gotten, complicated. She paused for a moment, then said, Actually, there's an apartment in our building that just became available. It's small, but it's clean and bright. And the rent is reasonable. My heart beat faster. Really? How much is it? Elizabeth said the amount, and I quickly calculated my options. My pension was modest, but if I saved money, it could be enough. Especially if I could get back some of the money from the sale of the house. And, Edith, Elizabeth continued, have you ever thought of talking to a lawyer about the money from the sale of your house? If your son has embezzled it? I don't want to sue my own son, I sighed. Sometimes it's enough to threaten legal action, she said. I know a lawyer who specializes in elderly cases. He could advise you. After talking to Elizabeth, I felt different. It was as if a door had opened in a dark room and a ray of light was shining through. I had a plan, a vague plan, but a plan nonetheless. I spent the next few days gathering information and thinking about my actions. By day, I played the role of a resigned older woman ready to accept her fate. I agreed with Paisley about the modern diet, nodded when Noel showed me pictures of the basement, and speculated about how I could set up a room there. I even started sorting through my stuff, ostensibly in preparation for moving downstairs. But at night, when the house was quiet, I made calls, researching my rights, making lists and calculations. I contacted a lawyer Elizabeth had recommended. Mr. Higgins proved to be an attentive listener and experienced professional. He explained that if I had not signed the documents donating the money from the sale of the house to my son, I had every right to claim it back. Was there a written agreement to manage those funds? He asked. No, I admitted. It was all lip service. Noel had said that he would invest the money so that it would yield a return. In that case, Mrs. Thornbridge, the law is on your side. I can draw up a formal letter demanding a refund. Often such a letter is enough to settle the matter out of court. I hesitated. It was one thing to plan to leave, but it was another to confront my son openly, threatening legal sanctions. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, Mr. Higgins agreed, but don't take too long. The more time that passes, the harder it is to recover the funds. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. It was raining outside the window, the drops drumming on the glass, and my mind was spinning with thoughts and memories. I remembered Noel, the boy with the broken knees and the curious eyes, how he came running to me with his little victories and defeats, how I comforted him when his first dog died, how proud I was of him when he went to college, the first in our family. Where is that boy? When did he turn into a man who could deceive his own mother? Who could give her a choice, either serve his wife or go to a nursing home? The rain intensified and I went to the window. In the reflection on the glass, I saw myself, gray hair, wrinkled face, hunched shoulders. But there was something in his eyes that I hadn't noticed in a long time: determination. You're not helpless, Edith, I said to myself. You've handled worse situations. I remembered being orphaned at 22 and paying my own way through college. How I helped Harold through job loss and depression at 45. How I survived the death of our firstborn, an infant who lived only 3 days. Life has tested me many times, and I have stood strong. I will stand strong now. Returning to the bed, I pulled out an old tin cookie box from under the mattress. It contained my secret savings, the money I'd been saving for years from every pension, without telling Noel. The amount was small, but enough for the down payment on the apartment Elizabeth was talking about. I counted the bills, folded them back neatly, and hid the box. Then I pulled the suitcase from the depths of the closet and set it in the far corner of the room, behind the chair. The old shabby suitcase that Harold and I had once taken on a wedding trip. It would yet serve me on one important journey, the journey to freedom. As I went to bed, I already knew that I would not know my place in my son's house or go to a nursing home. I had a third option that Noel and Paisley didn't even know about. And when the time came, they would be very surprised. The week after the family dinner passed in a strange lull. Paisley was unusually polite to me, even offering to help move some of my things down to the basement to try on. Noel wondered every night if I decided what I was going to do. I answered evasively, saying I was still considering my options. In fact, I'd already decided, but I wanted to wait for the right moment. That all changed on Saturday. Normally on Saturdays, Noel and Paisley slept in late and then went off to do their own thing. He to play golf with his coworkers, she to visit a spa or meet up with her friends. But that Saturday, they both stayed home and came down for breakfast at 8 in the morning, suddenly alert and serious. I was just finishing making French toast, Noel's favorite Saturday dish since childhood. Seeing them both in the kitchen so early surprised me, but I didn't let on. Good morning. Breakfast is almost ready. Paisley and Noel looked up as if on cue. Mom, my son began, clearing his throat. We need to have a serious talk. I silently put the plates of toast on the table and sat down across from them. Something in their faces told me that this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. Paisley and I discussed the situation, Noel continued, avoiding my eyes. And we've decided that it can't go on like this. What can't go on? I asked calmly. This uncertainty, Paisley interjected. We can't wait forever for you to decide what to do. We have plans for repairs, deadlines. I understand, I nodded. You need my decision. Exactly. Noel was obviously glad I wasn't arguing. You see, Mom, the designer suggested we start work in 2 weeks, so we need to decide on your accommodations, placement. It was like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be rearranged. What are my options? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Paisley pressed her lips together. We've been over this, Edith. Either you move into the cellar and adapt to our way of life, or we help you find a place in a nursing home. Adapting to your way of life, I repeated. What exactly does that mean? Paisley straightened up as if preparing for a rehearsed speech. First of all, more help around the house. I work full-time and then I have to cook, Clean. But I already do all the housework, I said. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, ironing, walking Chester. Not all of it, she cut me off. You don't iron my blouses properly, they get creases. You don't know how to handle delicate fabrics. And your cooking is too old-fashioned and heavy. We need modern light dishes. I remained silent, letting her continue. Besides, Noel said, it would be nice if you could keep an eye on the house when we're away. Water the plants, pick up the mail, make sure everything's okay. I already do that, I reminded him. But not always thoroughly enough, Paisley shook her head. Last time we came back from a weekend trip, the living room was dusty. And you forgot to water the orchid in the bedroom. It was almost withered. I could barely contain a smile. The orchid was almost withered because Paisley had put it in the worst possible place, on a windowsill with direct sunlight. I told her this 3 times, but she wouldn't listen. After all, what could an old woman know about such exquisite plants? I'll try to be more careful, I said instead. One more thing, Paisley leaned forward. We'd like you to stay out of Noel and I's decisions. And don't turn Marlowe against us. I've never turned Marlowe against you, I countered. You didn't? Paisley raised an eyebrow. Who gave her the idea that we were using you? That we were taking away your house? After her last visit, she'd called Noel and said a lot of unpleasant things. I looked at my son. He looked embarrassed but nodded, confirming my wife's words. Marlowe is really very upset, Mom. She thinks we're treating you like servants. Aren't we? I asked quietly. There was silence. Paisley turned red, and Noel turned pale. You see? Paisley exclaimed. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You think you're a victim, even though we're doing everything we can to help you. We put a roof over your head, we feed you. With the money from the sale of my house, I finished for her. Paisley shut her mouth. Noel fidgeted in his chair. Mom, we've been over this. Yes, there were some financial difficulties, but we still care about you. Without us, you'd be alone in that big house you couldn't keep. Or I'd have the money to live a decent life, I objected. The money you'd taken away when you said you'd put it in a trust fund. Noel's face hardened. Look, Mom, if you think we tricked you, the door is open. You can leave anytime you want. But then forget about help with housing or getting your money back. You're the one who agreed to let me run it. Is that a threat? I asked, feeling my heart beat faster. It's reality, he cut me off. Either you live by our rules or you leave. It's up to you. I looked at my son, the handsome, successful man I'd once held in my arms, wiped away his tears, supported him in every endeavor. I looked at his wife, a well-groomed woman with cold eyes, who saw me only as a hindrance to her ideal world. And suddenly, I felt a surprising calmness and clarity. I don't have to decide, I said quietly. I've already made up my mind. I got up from the table, leaving my breakfast untouched, and headed for the stairs. Paisley and Noel stared at me in bewilderment. In my room, I pulled out the suitcase I'd prepared a week ago from behind my chair. It already contained the most necessary things, clothes, documents, a few photos, my favorite books. I added a box with my secret savings and closed the suitcase. Then I sat down at the small desk and wrote a short note. Noel and Paisley, I accept your offer to leave. Don't worry about me. I'll take care of myself. We'll talk about the money from the sale of the house later through my lawyer, Mom. I reread the note and added a postscript. P.S. Orchids don't like direct sunlight. Put it in semi-shade and it will stop almost withering. Smiling, I placed the note on the bed, picked up my suitcase, and took one last look around the room where I had spent 3 joyless years. Strangely, I felt neither sadness nor fear, only relief, as if I were letting go of a heavy weight. When I came downstairs, I saw that Noel and Paisley were still sitting at the table, talking in hushed tones. They stopped talking when they saw me with the suitcase. Mom? Noel looked confused. What are you doing? I smiled for the first time in a long time, genuinely and freely. I'm leaving, like you suggested. But, where to? He clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. That's not your concern. I headed for the door. I left the note in my room. Goodbye. Edith, don't be ridiculous, exclaimed Paisley. You can't just go away. You're 77 years old. You have no money, no home. but I was already opening the front door. I turned around one last time. You know, Paisley, at my age, you start to realize what's really important in life. And it's definitely not expensive furniture, perfectly pressed blouses, or fancy diets. It's dignity and self-respect. Thank you for reminding me of that. With those words, I walked out of the house, closing the door behind me. It was a beautiful spring morning, bright sunshine, singing birds, a light breeze. I took a deep breath of fresh air and felt free. The suitcase was heavy on my old arms, but I wasn't going back. Slowly but determinedly, I walked down the street, heading towards the bus stop. Elizabeth was waiting for me. We had agreed that I would move in with her this afternoon. She didn't know I was coming so early, but I was sure she'd understand. On the way out, I pulled out my phone and dialed Marlo's number. She answered after the second beep. "Grandma, is everything okay?" "More than okay, honey," I answered. "I just left your parents." "What?" Her voice was full of disbelief. "You did? Where?" "To Elizabeth Ramsey's for now. Remember I told you about my coworker? And then I'll find my own place." "I couldn't stay there anymore, Marlo." "Oh my God, Grandma." She was quiet. "I'm proud of you. But are you sure you're going to be okay?" "I'm absolutely sure. I'm not as helpless as everyone thinks I am." "I know," she said, a smile in her voice. "Would you like me to come to you? I can be in Burlington by tonight." "Not tonight, darling. Give me a little time to get settled in. But I'd love to see you this weekend." We agreed that she would come on Saturday, and I continued on my way to the bus stop. The phone rang several times. Noel tried to contact me, but I didn't answer. All in good time. The bus took me to the neighborhood where Elizabeth lived, a quiet green neighborhood with low houses and well-kept yards. Elizabeth welcomed me with open arms and fluttered when she saw my suitcase. "Edith, I wasn't expecting you so soon. Did you really leave them?" "Yes," I smiled. "They gave me an ultimatum and I chose freedom." She shook her head, helping me carry my suitcase into the house. "Oh, Edith, Edith. I always knew you had a backbone. I remember how you stood up to Director Parker when he wanted to cut the lab's funding." We entered Elizabeth's cozy apartment filled with books, plants, and sunlight. She sat me down on the couch and went to make tea, not stopping to say, "I've already called the manager about the apartment. It's still available. You can see it tonight. It's not great, but it's a start." "Thank you, Elizabeth." I looked around her living room, noting the many pictures of her children and grandchildren. "I don't know how I can ever thank you enough for your help." "Nonsense," she returned with a tray of teacups and cookies. "We're friends. By the way, I told Vivian, my upstairs neighbor, about you. She's a widow like us, a former accountant. She's an amazing woman. At 81, she's still advising clients on financial matters. She was very interested in your situation with the money from the house sale." I took a sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread through my body. "Do you think she could help?" "I'm sure she could. She knows everything about finance and more. And she hates it when people take advantage of elderly relatives. She had a similar case with her nephew. We talked for hours about the past, our school years, our children and grandchildren. Elizabeth had divorced years ago and raised 2 children on her own, working 2 jobs. Her daughter was now a successful doctor and her son an engineer. They visited their mother regularly and helped her financially, even though she claimed it wasn't necessary. "My pension and what I have saved over the years is enough," she explained. "But it's nice for the children to help their mother, so I let them do that, within reason. Still, independence is a wonderful thing at any age." After lunch, the doorbell rang and Vivian came in. She was a tall, slender woman with close-cropped gray hair and piercing blue eyes. In spite of her age, she moved briskly and spoke clearly, without the typical uncertainty of the elderly. "Are you the Edith who finally sent her son and daughter-in-law to hell?" she asked directly instead of greeting. "Well done. It was about time." I couldn't help but laugh at the bluntness of it. "I wouldn't put it that way, but yes, that's me." Vivian sat down in the chair opposite me and looked at me carefully, as if assessing me. "Elizabeth told me your story. It's a classic case of children convincing an elderly parent to sell the house, promising care, and then using the money for their own needs. I've seen it dozens of times." "What can be done?" I asked. "A lot of things." Vivian leaned forward. "For starters, do you have any documents about the sale of the house? A deed, an account statement, where the money went?" I shook my head. Noel did all the paperwork. I just signed the papers. Do you have copies of those papers? Unfortunately, no. I wasn't thinking straight. Harold had just died, and I was devastated. Vivian nodded understandingly. That's typical. People take advantage of their relatives' vulnerability after losing loved ones. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. I know some excellent lawyers who specialize in protecting the rights of the elderly. We can consult with them. I've already contacted the lawyer Elizabeth recommended, I said, minus Mr. Higgins. He says that without a written agreement, Noel had no right to use my money as he saw fit. Higgins is a good choice, Vivian approved. But you'll need proof. Bank statements, deeds to the house. You can ask the bank and the notary who handled the transaction. What if Noel refuses to pay the money back? Then you'd have to go to court, Vivian shrugged. But often, the threat of a lawsuit is enough. People don't like to bring family matters into the public eye, especially when it comes to financial fraud with elderly parents. It does a lot of damage to reputations. I sighed, imagining how it would come to a lawsuit against my own son. Vivian, as if reading my thoughts, put her hand on my shoulder. I know what you're thinking. How can I sue my own child? But answer yourself this question. Did your son think about your feelings when he cheated you? When he wasted your money? When he gave you ultimatums? She was right, but that didn't make it any easier. Noel was my only son after all. Despite his actions, I still loved him. Let's focus on a place for you to live first, Elizabeth suggested, seeing my hesitation. Financial matters could be worked out later. The important thing is that you have a roof over your head. We went to see the apartment that was for rent in their building. It was a small studio on the first floor, just one room with a kitchenette and a tiny bathroom. But the windows looked out onto a green courtyard. It was bright and quiet. The rent was well within my means, especially with my secret savings. I'll take it, I decided after a moment's thought. Good, Elizabeth hugged me. The manager says you can move in tomorrow. He'll draw up the contract. In the meantime, stay at my place, she suggested. I have a guest room that's been empty since the children left. That evening, nestled in Elizabeth's cozy guest room, I finally checked my phone. 15 missed calls from Noel, 3 from Paisley, and several messages. I opened the first one. Mom, this is crazy. Please come home. We can talk things out. The second was more insistent. Where are you? We're worried. You can't just leave. It's not safe at your age. And the last one, sent an hour ago, was already threatening. If you don't come back, we'll go to the police. You're an elderly person. You need supervision. I shook my head. Even now, they couldn't recognize that I had the right to make my own decisions. To them, I was just a helpless old woman, unable to take care of myself. I typed a short reply. I'm safe at a friend's house. No need to go to the police. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. Putting the phone away, I looked out the window at evening Burlington. A city that had been a stranger to me for the past 3 years suddenly seemed full of possibilities. Perhaps at 77, my life was just beginning. The first morning in Elizabeth's apartment, I woke up with an unfamiliar feeling: freedom. No one expected me to make breakfast by a certain time, no one to criticize the quality of the coffee or the way I cut the fruit. I could just lie in bed and watch the sunlight play on the wall. Elizabeth was an early bird, just like me. When I went into the kitchen, she was already making tea. Did you sleep well? She asked with a smile. Better than I had in the last 3 years, I admitted. I never thought I'd be starting a new life at my age. Life is full of surprises. Elizabeth put a cup of tea in front of me. By the way, Vivian called. She made an appointment with Mr. Higgins for today. She wants to go with you for moral support. She's very kind, I said, surprised at the willingness of an almost unknown woman to help me. Vivian doesn't tolerate injustice, Elizabeth explained, especially when it comes to the elderly. She'd had a bad experience with her nephew, who'd tried to take her savings. She's been helping people like you ever since. After breakfast, we went to Mr. Higgins's office. Vivian was already waiting at the entrance. Straight, trim, with a sharp gaze that seemed like it could drill through a wall. In her navy blue suit, she looked like a general preparing for a decisive battle. Edith, she shook my hand firmly. Are you ready to stand up for your rights? I hope so, I answered, feeling a little uncertain. Mr. Higgins was younger than I expected, about 50, with attentive eyes and a calm manner of speech. He listened patiently to my story, making notes in his notebook. Mrs. Thornbridge, he said when I had finished, your case is unfortunately typical. Children persuade elderly parents to sell real estate, promise care and financial support, and then use the money for their own needs. But what can I do? I asked. I don't have any paperwork. Noel did all the paperwork. That's not a problem, Mr. Higgins smiled. We can ask for copies of the sale documents from the real estate company and bank statements. What's important is whether the house was deeded to you or to your late husband. Both of us, I answered. We bought it together when we were young. That's good. When your husband died, you inherited his share. That means that the house belonged to you at the time of the sale. Unless there was a written agreement to give the money to your son as a gift or management, legally the funds are still yours. Vivian nodded as if she was well aware of all this. What if Noel refuses to return the money? I asked. Then we'll sue, Mr. Higgins said calmly. But it doesn't usually come to that. A formal letter from a lawyer is enough. Few people want the public to know that he embezzled money from an elderly mother. We agreed that Mr. Higgins would start gathering documents and prepare a formal letter to Noel. I left him all the details of the transaction that I could remember, the date of the sale, the approximate amount, the name of the real estate company. Don't worry, Mrs. Thornbridge, he said goodbye. The law is on your side. As I left the office, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just going with the flow, but taking concrete steps. Well, the matter is moving forward, Vivian said with satisfaction. Now I suggest we celebrate with a little excursion. She took Elizabeth and me to the local community center, which turned out to have a small winter garden and greenhouse. Elizabeth mentioned that you like gardening, Vivian explained. Here you can rent a small plot in the greenhouse or in the courtyard. Many older people grow flowers, vegetables, herbs. It's both a hobby and a way to save money on groceries. We entered a spacious greenhouse where pots with plants and raised beds stood in perfect order. Several older people were working there. Some were watering, some were loosening the soil, some were harvesting greens. Mrs. Hayward, a full-figured middle-aged woman approached us. It's good to see you. Your cherry tomatoes are starting to turn red. Thank you, Doris, Vivian nodded. I'd like you to meet Edith Thornbridge, a new resident in the neighborhood. She's interested in the possibility of renting a plot. Doris turned out to be the manager of the garden project. She enthusiastically told me about the various options, from a small bed in a communal greenhouse to a plot of land in a courtyard. Have you ever done any gardening, Mrs. Thornbridge? She asked. All my life, I answered, feeling a long-forgotten enthusiasm welling up inside me. I had my own garden and greenhouse, until recently. Then you'll like it here, Doris smiled. We are a very friendly community. We exchange experiences, seeds, workshops. I rented a small plot in the greenhouse, only 4 square meters, but that would be enough for me. Vivian helped me with the paperwork, and the next day I could start work. This is just the beginning, Vivian said as we drove home. There are many activities in our neighborhood for people our age. The local college offers free lectures for seniors. The library has a book club. I even take an occasional yoga class for seniors. Yoga at your age? I couldn't hide my surprise. Vivian laughed. Edith, I'm 81, but I'm not going to act like an old woman. Yoga helps you keep your flexibility and balance. And you know what the funny thing is? Our instructor is 3 years older than me. The next few days went by with a lot of pleasantries. I moved my stuff into the small apartment I rented at Elizabeth's house. The room was tiny but bright and cozy. The windows overlooked a quiet courtyard with flower beds and benches where the elderly residents often sat, talking and enjoying the fresh air. Vivian was tireless. She introduced me to all the neighbors, showed me the best stores in the area where groceries were cheaper, and even made me a list of all the free activities for seniors in the area. There's an art history lecture at the local college today, she informed me on the 5th day of my new life. The topic is the Impressionists. Will you come with me? I said yes, even though I didn't know much about art. But the lecture was fascinating. The professor told simply and with humor, showed slides, shared funny stories from the life of artists. I caught myself thinking that I can't remember the last time I had such an interesting time. After the lecture, Vivian introduced me to several regular attendees, similarly elderly people who regularly attended educational events. One of the women, recognizing that I was a former chemistry teacher, invited me to a meeting of the Science Enthusiast Club. We meet once a week, discuss the latest science news, and sometimes do simple experiments, she explained. We lack someone with a good understanding of chemistry. Gradually, my life took on a new meaning. In the morning, I worked in my small greenhouse growing tomatoes, basil, and flowers. In the afternoon, I attended lectures, master classes, or simply walked around the city, discovering places I didn't even know existed when I lived with my son. In the evenings, I often gathered with Elizabeth, Vivian, and other neighbors to drink tea, play board games, and discuss books. Marlo came to visit me on the third day after I left. She was amazed to see my new life. "Grandma, you're different," she said, looking around my small but cozy apartment. "It's like you're younger." "Freedom works wonders, dear," I smiled. "How are your parents?" Marlo rolled her eyes. "They're a mess. Dad doesn't know how to turn on the washing machine. Mom complains that she doesn't have time to do housework. They even had a fight over the unwashed dishes." I couldn't hold back a smile as I pictured this picture. "They'll get over it," I said. "They just need time to adjust." "Dad called me 3 times, Marlo continued. "Demanded that I convince you to come back. Said you couldn't live alone, that it was dangerous to your health. And what did you say? That you looked happier than you had in all 3 years in their house, and that if they really cared about your well-being, they should respect your choice." I hugged my granddaughter, feeling a surge of pride in her wisdom and independence. "You know, I've always wanted grandchildren," I told her. "But I never thought a granddaughter could be my support and protector." Marlo stayed for dinner and met Vivian and Elizabeth. Vivian, with her straightforwardness and sharp mind, took an immediate liking to my granddaughter. "Your grandmother is an amazing woman," said Vivian Marlo. "A lot of people in her position would have just resigned themselves to it, but she found the strength to start a new life." "I always knew she was stronger than she looked," Marlo said. "Her parents just didn't give her a chance to show it." After Marlo left, I thought about Noel a lot. Despite his actions, he was still my son. I loved him and worried about him. But for the first time in years, I put my own interests ahead of his comfort. And it was the right thing to do. On the 7th day of my new life, Mr. Higgins called with the news. "Mrs. Thornbridge, I have received all the necessary papers. The amount from the sale of your house totaled $365,000. The bank statements show that the money was deposited into your son's account, and then most of it was spent on buying a new car, renovating the house, and investing in stocks in his name. So I can prove that the money was misspent?" I asked. "Absolutely. I have prepared an official letter demanding the return of the funds within 30 days. Otherwise, we will be forced to go to court." I hesitated. It was one thing to leave my son's house, but it was another to demand the money back through a lawyer. "Don't hesitate, Mrs. Thornbridge," said Mr. Higgins, as if he had read my thoughts. "Your son did wrong. That money is your only financial safety cushion. You deserve to have it for your old age." I agreed, and the letter was sent. Vivian supported the decision. "You're not doing anything wrong," she reassured me. "You're just restoring justice. Noel must be held accountable for his actions." The next day, Noel called. I saw his name on the phone screen, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. He left an angry message accusing me of ingratitude and threatening serious consequences if I continued to listen to bad advice. Vivian, upon hearing this message, only snorted. A typical reaction of a person caught doing something dishonest. First anger, then there will be attempts to manipulate your feelings. Don't give in. She was right. 2 days later, Noel called again, but the tone of his message had changed. Now he was saying he was worried about me, that I could always come back, that he and Paisley had rethought everything and were ready to make my room more comfortable. "See?" Vivian shook her head. "Now he's trying to lure you back. But notice, not a word about a refund. On the 10th day after I left my son's house, several important events happened at once. In the morning, I got a letter from the management of the building where I was renting the apartment. It turned out that in the same building, A small studio apartment on the second floor was for sale. The price was affordable, well below market value, because the previous owner, an elderly man, was moving into a nursing home and wanted to sell quickly. "This is your chance, Edith," Vivian said when I showed her the letter. "If you pay back the money from the sale of the house, you can buy this apartment and still have money to live on." We went to look at the apartment with Elizabeth. It was a little bigger than the one I'd rented, with a separate bedroom and a small balcony facing east. Sunlight flooded the rooms in the morning, and the window overlooked a small park. "It's very cozy here," I said, imagining how I could furnish the space. "And the balcony would be perfect for growing flowers." "It's decided." Vivian clapped her hands together. "We'll take it." "But I don't have the money yet," I reminded her. "Noel hasn't responded to the lawyer's letter yet." "We can put down a small deposit to reserve the apartment," Vivian suggested, "and the rest when you get your money back." That's what we did. My secret savings went toward the deposit, and the apartment was reserved for me for 30 days, the period during which Noel had to respond to Mr. Higgins's letter. When I returned home after this pleasant news, I found my phone literally ringing off the hook. Noel was ringing every 15 minutes, and in between his calls came calls from Paisley. I decided it was time to answer it. "Hello," I said, picking up the phone on my son's next call. "Mom, finally." He sounded relieved and panicked at the same time. "You have to call that lawyer off right now." "Hello, Noel," I said calmly. "It's good to hear from you, too." "Mom, do you realize what you're doing?" His voice shook with tension. "You're suing your own son." "Not yet," I said calmly. "It's just a letter asking for my money back. The money from the sale of the house where your father and I lived for 35 years. But that money, it's invested. I can't give it back right now." "Invested in your new car? To fix up your house? In stocks in your name?" I listed the facts Mr. Higgins had given me. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Noel spoke in a different tone. A pleading, almost weeping tone. "Mom, please. You don't understand. We're in so much trouble right now. Paisley is hysterical, saying we won't be able to pay off the house loan if we have to pay that money back. We could lose the house, we could end up on the street." "How could I be on the street when you gave me an ultimatum?" I asked quietly. Silence again. It was wrong," he finally admitted. "I'm sorry. Paisley and I are both sorry. Please come back. We'll make it right." "This isn't about coming back, Noel. It's about justice. This money is all I have for my old age. I don't want to sue you, but I can't let you control my future. But without you, everything fell apart." There was desperation in his voice. "The house is a mess. The food is disgusting. Paisley's in a bad mood because she has to do everything herself. And now this letter from the lawyer. Mom, I'm panicking." I sighed. Despite everything that had happened, Noel was still my son. I loved him, even when he did wrong. "Let's get together and talk," I suggested. "Just you and me, without Paisley. Maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone." "Really?" There was hope in his voice. "You're not going to sue?" "If we can reach an amicable settlement, there's no need for a trial." We agreed to meet the next day at a neutral place, a cafe downtown. When we finished talking, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I spoke to my son not as an old woman dependent on him, but as an equal, a person with her own rights and dignity. Vivian, hearing about the upcoming meeting, was skeptical. "He will press your maternal feelings," she warned. "He will try to soften you up, to make you give up your demands. Be firm." "I will," I promised. "But he's still my son. I want to give him a chance to make things right without a trial." "That's your right," Vivian shrugged. "But remember, you deserve that money. It's yours legally and rightfully." That night I couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about the upcoming meeting. What would I tell Noel? How would I explain to him that I couldn't just forget about the money? How would I preserve my relationship with my only son while at the same time asserting my rights? The Morning Star Cafe was in the old part of Burlington, a cozy place with wooden tables and large windows overlooking the pedestrian street. I arrived 15 minutes ahead of schedule so I could pick a comfortable table and gather my thoughts. Vivian had insisted that we carefully strategize our conversation before the meeting. Be firm but not aggressive, she advised. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. And remember, you have every right to that money. I ordered a tea with lemon and looked out the window, watching passersby. A woman with a stroller, an elderly couple holding hands, young people with backpacks rushing somewhere. Ordinary life that went on around me despite my personal dramas. At exactly 11 o'clock, the door of the cafe opened and Noel walked in. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt slightly wrinkled, which wasn't typical of my always impeccably dressed son. He looked around, spotted me, and headed toward my table. Mom, he leaned over to kiss my cheek, but I barely felt the touch. It was so formal. Hello, Noel. I pointed to the chair across from me. Sit down, please. He sat down, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. You look good, he said, scrutinizing me. Better than before. Thank you. I do feel better. There was an awkward silence. The waitress came over to take the order. Noel asked for a strong coffee without sugar, his usual choice. So, he began as the waitress left. Did you get my message? That we want you to come back? I did, I nodded. And I appreciate you wanting to make things right. But my answer is no. His face stretched. But why? We're going to change things, I promise. No basement, no ultimatums. You can keep your room or we can set up a guest room for you, with a private bath and all the amenities. It's not about the room, Noel. I looked him straight in the eye. It's about respect. You and Paisley don't see me as a full human being with my own desires and rights. To you, I'm a convenient addition to the house that should know its place. He blushed. That's not fair, Mother. We've taken care of you. Maybe not always perfectly, but you took care of me with my own money, I interrupted him. The money from selling the house I loved. And even that taking care consisted of demanding more and more housework from me. The waitress brought coffee. Noel took a big sip, as if trying to find encouragement in the hot drink. Okay, I admit, Paisley and I have been, sometimes, inappropriate, but it can be fixed. We'll treat you differently, I promise. Maybe, I nodded. But I'm not going back, Noel. I found my place and my path. I have friends now, classes, plans for the future. I feel alive for the first time in years. His face changed from confusion to anger, then calculation. It's that woman, isn't it? Elizabeth? Or her accountant friend? They turned you against your own family. No one turned me against my family, I said calmly. I made the decision to leave after your ultimatum. Vivian was just helping me with the legal side of things. The legal side? He grinned sardonically. Now we're getting to the point. You want money. I want what's rightfully mine, I said firmly. The money from the sale of my house. The money you took control of and spent on the car, repairs, and stocks. Noel turned pale. How do you know that? My lawyer requested all the necessary documents, bank statements, details of the sale of the house, information about your major purchases during that period. It's all traceable. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood. It was what he always did when he was cornered and didn't know what to say. Mom, you don't understand. There was a great investment opportunity back then. I invested the money so it would bring in more profits. Yes, some of it went to the car and repairs, but those were necessary expenses. I was going to pay it all back. When? I asked. It's been 3 years, Noel. In that time, you never once talked about paying me back. On the contrary, you've convinced me that it was complicated. He looked away. It's not a good time to sell stock. The market is unstable. If you wait a little longer. I waited 3 years, I interrupted him. I won't wait any longer. Either you return the money voluntarily, or we go to court. You'd sue your own son? I could hear the disbelief in his voice. Would you cheat your own mother? I parried. I already had, to be precise. There was a heavy silence. Noel stared into his cup, as if it might hold all the answers. I can't take it all back at once, he said at last. It's just not possible. Some of the money is actually invested in stocks that are not profitable to sell now. The car has lost value. The repairs? Well, it's a waste of money. How much can you get back immediately? I asked. He hesitated, doing some calculations in his mind. Maybe, 100,000? if I sold the stock at a loss and took out a short-term loan. And the rest? The rest? Maybe in installments? Over a year or two? I shook my head. That's too long, Noel. I need that money now. I want to buy an apartment, get my life together. An apartment? He looked surprised. You're going to buy a place at your age? What's so surprising about that? I asked. I'm 77, not 97. I could live another 15 or 20 years. And I want to spend them in my own home, not a rented apartment or a nursing home. Noel looked confused, as if the thought had never occurred to him. Maybe he really thought that at my age, you don't make plans or dream about the future. I could sell more stock, he said slowly, and take out a loan against the house. Maybe I could pay back $250,000 within a month. But that's the maximum. And the other $115,000? I knew the exact amount, and I wanted him to understand that. Within 6 months, he sighed. That's the best I can offer, Mother. If you insist on paying back the entire sum immediately, the only option is to sell the house. And with the current mortgage rates, we're not likely to find anything suitable to replace it. I considered his offer. $250,000 would be enough to buy the apartment I was looking at, and I'd even have enough left over for the first time. But I didn't want to leave the rest of the money hanging. You'll have to sign a legally binding document to repay the rest of the money within 6 months, I said, with specific dates and penalties for late payment. Noel grimaced but nodded. Good, I'm in. One more thing, I added. I want you to understand that this isn't revenge or a desire to punish you. This is my right to control my money and my life. I understand, he said quietly. You do? I looked at him carefully. Because I think you still think I should have just accepted my fate, living in the basement, serving Paisley, not claiming my own money. No, he hesitated. I just never thought you could be so determined, so strong. Because you stopped seeing me as a person, Noel. I've become just old mom to you, a burden to be cared for but neglected. He lowered his head. Maybe you're right. I'm sorry. I reached out and touched his palm. I'm sorry it's come to this too. But you know, sometimes a crisis is an opportunity to build something new and better. I hope we can build a relationship, but on equal terms, without manipulation or disrespect. You're really not coming back? There was sadness in his voice, but without the same insistence. No, Noel, I'll visit you if you want me to. We can meet for family holidays, but I'll live apart. What about Paisley? She's, well, you know what she's like. I have nothing against Paisley, I said, even though it wasn't entirely true. But I will not tolerate disrespect. Not from her or anyone else. We agreed that Noel would contact Mr. Higgins to handle all the necessary paperwork. He promised to return the first installment of the money within 2 weeks, once he sold the stock and finalized the loan. As we said goodbye at the door of the cafe, he suddenly hugged me, a real hug, as he had when he was a child, when he was still not ashamed to show affection for his mother. I'll make it up to you, Mom, he whispered. I promise. I know, I said, though I wasn't sure I would. As I drove home, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. On the one hand, I had succeeded in asserting my rights, but on the other hand, it hurt to see how my relationship with my only son had changed. But maybe this change was necessary. Maybe it was the only way we could build a healthy, respectful relationship. Vivian was waiting impatiently for me. Well? She asked as soon as I crossed the threshold. How did it go? I told her about our conversation and the agreement we had reached. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the arm of her chair. Not perfect, but acceptable. The main thing is to have him sign a legally binding document for the remaining amount, and with specific payment dates. Minus Mr. Higgins will handle it, I assured her. Noel will contact him in the next few days. Let's hope so. Vivian still looked skeptical. But in any case, $250,000 will be enough to buy an apartment. You can start a new life without waiting for the rest of the money. That's what happened. Noel kept his word, at least the first part of it. 12 days after our meeting, Mr. Higgins reported that the promised $250,000 had arrived in a specially opened account. An agreement had also been signed to repay the remaining amount over a period of 6 months, in monthly installments. Congratulations, Mrs. Thornbridge, said Mr. Higgins, handing me the documents. "You can dispose of these funds as you see fit." The first thing I did was to contact the building manager and arrange the purchase of the apartment I'd been looking at. The process took some time. I had to sign a lot of documents, make a deposit, and wait for the title check. But finally everything was ready, and I became the owner of my own home. A small but cozy apartment with a balcony facing east. The move was a joyous occasion. Vivian, Elizabeth, and a few other neighbors helped me move my things and arrange the furniture I had bought at an inexpensive secondhand store. My new apartment gradually took on a personality, with bookshelves filled with my favorite volumes, pots of flowers on the windowsills, and a comfortable chair by the window where I could sit and read while watching the street life. Marlo had come for a housewarming party, bringing a few plants for my balcony: rosemary, basil, a small bush of lavender. "So you'll always have fresh herbs on hand, Grandma," she said as she set the pots down. "And to make your balcony smell like that garden at Ridgefield." We threw a small party: me, Marlo, Vivian, Elizabeth, and a few other new friends. The table was set in the center of the living room. The lights softly illuminated the room, and jazz music blared from the old radio I'd brought from the Ridgefield house. "To Edith's new life," Vivian raised her wine glass. "To courage and determination. To friendship," Elizabeth added. "To support in times of need. To always being yourself." Marlo raised her glass. "Even when the whole world is trying to box you in." I looked at these people, some I'd known for a few weeks, others, like Marlo, for a lifetime, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. They helped me find strength I thought I had long lost. They believed in me when I myself doubted. After the party, when the guests had dispersed and Marlo had gone to spend the night at Elizabeth's, my new apartment was too small for guests. I stepped out onto the balcony. The night Burlington spread out before me: window lights, sparse cars, the silence broken only by the distant noise of the main street. I thought about the path I'd traveled in the past weeks. From a wordless maid in my son's house to an independent woman with her own place and plans for the future. From a man who let me decide for myself to someone who determines her own destiny. Noel called the next day to congratulate me on my housewarming. He sounded sincere, though a little reserved. "How do you like your new apartment?" he asked. "It's perfect," I replied. "It's small, but it's enough for me. And most importantly, it's mine." "I'm happy for you, Mom." I could hear the sadness in his voice. "Really happy. I'm sorry for everything." "I've already forgiven you, Noel," I said. "But I haven't forgotten, and I hope you don't forget that lesson either." "I won't," he promised. Paisley and I have been rethinking a lot of things these past weeks. She wanted me to apologize, too. I didn't particularly believe Paisley's apology was sincere, but I decided to accept it. "Tell her I mean no offense. You're always welcome to come visit. Just warn me in advance. The apartment is small. You need to prepare." "I will," he promised. "Maybe next weekend, if you do not mind." I agreed, and we agreed on a visit. To be honest, I wasn't looking forward to this meeting with great enthusiasm, but I realized that I had to make steps towards it. After all, Noel was my only son, and I didn't want to completely sever the relationship. Life was slowly falling into a new direction. I continued working on my allotment at the community greenhouse, attending college lectures and meeting new friends. My little balcony became a blooming oasis: petunias, geraniums, daisies, in addition to the herbs Marlo had given me. In the mornings, I liked to sit there with a cup of tea, watching the city wake up. One day, looking through old photographs, I came across a picture taken many years ago of Harold and me on the shore of Lake Champlain. We were young, happy, full of hope. Harold was holding my hand and pointing to something in the distance. A sailboat gliding across the water, I think. "Someday we'll go traveling," he said then. "We'll see different countries, different cities. When the children are grown, when we have enough money." But the trip never happened. There were always more important things to do, more urgent expenses: Noel's education, house repairs, unexpected medical bills, and then Harold got sick, and there was no time to travel. I looked at that picture for a long time, and then I made a decision. Not all the money from the sale of the house had come back to me yet, but I had enough to fulfill my and Harold's dream. Not a grand round-the-world trip, of course, but something meaningful, something for myself. In the morning, I went to a travel agency and booked a week-long cruise around the lakes of New England, starting with Champlain, where we had once dreamed with Harold, and ending with Lake George. The motorboat was leaving in 2 weeks, just enough time to get ready. Vivian was delighted with my idea. Well done, Edith. That's the way to live, not to put dreams on hold. Do you know how many people die without doing something they've dreamed of all their lives? I invited her to join the cruise, but she shook her head. It's your trip, honey. Yours and Harold's in a way. I'd only be in the way. But promise to bring me back a souvenir and tell me about all the adventures. Marlo was happy to hear about my plans, too. Grandma, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. You're setting an example for all of us. Noel was surprised when I told him about the upcoming trip. By yourself? At your age? His voice betrayed concern. I'm 77, not 107, I reminded him. And there will be medical personnel on the boat if that's what you're worried about. I didn't expect you to be traveling. Life is full of surprises, Noel. I smiled, remembering Elizabeth's words. Especially when you stop living up to other people's expectations. On the day of departure, Vivian, Elizabeth, and Marlo walked me to the dock. The motor ship wasn't too big, but it was cozy and elegant. My cabin was small, but with a beautiful view of the water. When the departure signal sounded, I went on deck and waved to my friends standing on the shore. The wind fluttered my gray hair, the sun glistened on the surface of the lake, and a week of new experiences and discoveries lay ahead. I felt not like an old woman reaching the end of her age, but like a traveler just beginning her journey. Look, Harold, I said mentally to my husband as if he could hear me. We're going on a trip after all. A little later than planned, but better late than never, right? And I thought the slight breeze that touched my cheek was his answer, quiet approval and joy for me. For both of us. The boat was slowly moving away from the shore, taking me towards new horizons. And I stood on the deck smiling and thinking that life is really just beginning at any age, if you have the courage to take it into your own hands.